Am I live?
Yes.
3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Pej here from Beginnings Treatment Centers. Just wanted to check in again today and do our weekly show, the live show, the streaming show that we do. Today we are going to be talking about, well, I'm going to be answering some questions about spirituality and recovery and the importance of spirituality and recovery, if that's your get down. Some people um, there's various questions that have been asked to me by me to me already, and I want to kind of go over those at first, and then I can answer some questions that you may have too. First of all, a lot of people think that. Let me just explain why this is why I believe spirituality is very important in recovery. Depending on who you are and what your demographics were and where you came from and your background, your upbringing, be it religious or whatever, a lot of people, when they come into recovery, they have no concept of what spirituality is. A lot of people think that spirituality is a religious thing. Personally, from my own personal experience, you have to understand, like, I'm an Iranian, I'm Persian, right? So I was born in Germany, raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. Dad was Muslim, and our neighbors were all Mormon, and so it was I was a very mixed up child, for better sake of words. I just didn't know what it all consist, like what was spirituality, what was God, who was it, Jesus, was it Muhammad? I had no idea. So over the course of my life, I definitely got sidetracked with drugs and alcohol, and I went down a very wrong, dark path. Always in the back of my head, I wondered about God. I wasn't sure about God. I didn't know what God was, what God consisted of. And then also the type of lifestyle I was living, I felt like if there was anything like God that existed, he or she is probably not very happy with me because I'm a full-blown drug addict, alcoholic that's not living a healthy life. I didn't know what the word spirituality meant. I was going to say a spiritual life. So anyway, so I come into recovery and I have to change everything and change my whole mentality and the way that I look at things. And so I'd come into various rooms, 12-step rooms, and everyone would be talking about living a spiritual life. And then some people would talk about a spiritual malady, or some people would say that they were spiritually bankrupt or spiritually corrupt. And I started to kind of relate with that. I realized that me personally, that the type of lifestyle that I had, I was so far in the clouds, I was never centered. I was either living in the future, living in the past. I was definitely a victim of my own circumstances. So therefore, there was no kind of spiritual connection to anything. I had an obsessive way of thinking about everything, be it how am I going to get my next fix, how am I going to get the drugs, the alcohol, persons, places, or things. I was very addicted to things, and my mind, my obsessive thoughts were always trying to make this body feel good. And in the process of doing this, we just went dark. Is everything okay?
Oh,
Okay, good.
yeah, everything looks
Okay, great.
okay.
So, in the process of always trying to make my mind, make my body feel good, I got, I had no concept of anything outside of myself or within. I was not connected with my soul. I lost my soul. So, in doing so, I got into recovery after many failed attempts of trying to get sober. I would often try to get sober, but I would try to do it my way. I would just dry out, and I was left to my own devices and my stinking thinking. I would maybe sometimes clear out my all the drugs. I would finish the drugs, and I would just try to quit and just not do them anymore and stay sober. But it was always a miserable fail. I had no concept of how to actually tap into the spirit within. So I got sober. My one and only time I went to treatment, they started sending me to these meetings, and I go to meetings, and people would, often talk about. I have a spiritual malady. So, what is a spiritual malady? Basically, it's when I'm letting all of life circumstances consume me to the point where I have to gravitate towards drugs and alcohol to numb out. I am basically suffering within, right? I'm a victim of my own circumstances. I hate my life. I hate myself. I'm selfish. I'm self-centered. I'm full of self-pity, and there's just no connection to anything. So, me personally, I had this tragic accident happen where somebody had died when I was 17 years old, and so I kind of just outruled God all the way. God had no place in my life. I remember I'd come into recovery, and a lot of people would throw the idea of God and God's name around a lot. And I thought, oh, great, another spirit, like another religious program where they're just trying to get me to buy into their religion. They've got their book and they've got all these beliefs, and I'd hear the word God and I would just cringe. And I later on came to find that spirituality, from the way the people that were around me, the way they were teaching me in recovery, had nothing to do with religion, because there was people from all walks of life that were coming into recovery and from all different religions. And obviously, when you're raised in a certain religion, you are, and I'm not discounting anything that any religion believes. When you're raised in certain religions, you kind of feel like that's like the only thing that counts. At least that's what you're taught. And if you're not part of that, you're a sinner, right? So what I learned down the line was that there is actually, in my life, I believe in God. Some people say higher power, and some people say, do you think spiritual or higher power? Do you think spiritual or higher power is an important aspect of recovery? That was the question that was presented to me, and for me, it really works. I mean, like, I believe that there is something greater than myself, some kind of creative intelligence that has created all of creation, right? And I choose to call it God. Some people choose to call it higher power. Some people choose to call it the ocean, or many different things. I mean, there's a lot of people that look towards other things that are greater than themselves, and then there's some people that are full-on atheists and agnostics that are in recovery and they stay sober. Some people view the group of people around them as a whole as a higher power, because they're a group of people who are staying sober, and that's something that they couldn't do. So they look up to these people and they ask them questions, and they ask them, if I want to make this decision, should I do that? If I want to make that decision, should I do this? And if they tell you, no, don't go that way, don't do this, don't do that, they're basically, they're not worshiping these people, but they're taking guidance from something more than them. Um, So again, back to the question: does higher power have to be religious? Absolutely not. Higher power, to me, has nothing to do with religion. There's a funny saying that I've once heard. Somebody said it, and I heard this guy tell me one time. He said, "Religion is for people who are afraid to go to hell, and spirituality is for people who have actually been there." I don't know, if that. And when it comes to, I've been to hell and back, right? Like I've seen some of the darkest, deathliest experiences in my lifetime, and I've actually seen demons in people, and then I've actually felt like I've had demons working through me. So I've been to hell and back, and now life has never been better. How do I connect in finding a higher power? So this is interesting. Some people, they come into, let's say, like a 12-step group, and they get into the various respective books that the 12 steps have to offer. Personally, I would hear a lot of people talk about hitting their knees in the morning and praying to God. So for me, that was really difficult. I had a friend that told me one time, so do you pray, Pej? And I said, yeah. I lay in my bed in rehab and I pray until I fall asleep. And he said, you're lazy, man. Get on your knees and humble yourself to God. And I'm like, but bro, I don't know that I really believe in God. Like, what am I praying to? He goes, just do it, just try it. So for me, what had happened was, over a period of time of repetitively getting down on my knees and praying, I started to feel this connection with some kind of spirit outside of myself, whatever it may be. And for me, I started thinking, truly this is God. Because left to my own devices, for the longest time, I couldn't stay sober for the life of me. So I needed something. I needed to find something that was greater than myself, that I could trust through the process, even with blind faith. And so it started to work. It started to actually like become it became the most vital, important part of my life. I can always tap into that resource no matter what's going on, whether I'm having a hard day or something like that. I can always ask God for guidance, and that's what I do. To each their own. Some people will never do it and don't. They are just devout atheists, the devout agnostics. No judgment, because I used to be an agnostic for the longest time. For me, being an agnostic was basically, I don't want to say I'm a straight up atheist, because what if there is a God and I'm not sure? So agnostic was at least something more like on a medium level, where I was like, okay, so I'm not sure if there's a God, but it's better to be unsure than to just be absolutely certain that I don't want to be that. So I see it working for some people. Some people actually stay sober, and to each their own. So another question that was presented to me was, what if you've never been a religious person or you don't like religion? So there are a lot of people that don't like religion in recovery. It's actually one of the things that turns people off the most is that when they come into recovery, they think that people are just trying to, force God onto them. And I believe one of the beauties of recovery, at least in the circles that I run in, is that you get to create your own concept of God, however that may be. It's nothing that's pushed on me. It's nothing that's forced on me. I myself had the opportunity to. This is my experience. This is what I believe happened. Is I this time around in attempting to come into recovery and stay sober, I was in the right places around the right people at the right time that said the right things to the point where they caught my attention and they hooked me and made me realize I want to stay sober, like absolutely sober. It didn't happen right away. It was, a progressive thing. I just happened to be listening. I took the cotton out of my ears and put them in my mouth for long enough to the point where I could actually hear what people were saying, relate to them, and it was as if, for me, what I believe is as if God was talking through them. That is truly what I think was happening, and it made me, stick around and then learn to kind of just have my own experience and be able to tap into that higher power, which I choose to call God. Um, then the other question that was last presented to me was, what kind of benefits, if anything, would you say to get from active prayer or meditation? So for me, in praying, when I get down on my knees and I pray to God, the benefit that it is that I can review my day and then I can thank God for just another day of breathing. And then I can thank God for another day of sobriety. So it's kind of like just my quiet time where I'm talking to God in prayer. And what I was taught, by the people that were around me was that I don't need to ask God for anything because usually that's a selfish act if I'm asking for tangible things or just things to happen in my life. Everything happens the way it happens in life. Nothing happens by mistake in God's world. This is what I believe. And so when I'm praying to God, it's kind of like when I'm thanking Him and just being at one with God. When I'm meditating, what I like to do, and this took me a long time because for the first 5 years of my recovery, I had a very loud head. There was a lot of chatter going on in my head. I couldn't shut my head off, so I would talk. I would think about like meditative practices that I'd learned in karate, for example, when I was a kid, and it was really hard for me to just tune out. And I believe that the best meditations that I started to experience were probably at 5 years of sobriety. I got to the point where I was seeking soundness of mind and just quietness, but I worked in this sober living where there was a lot of guys coming and going. So one night when it was really late at night and there was nobody there and I was going through a hard time, I was kind of desperate, like for some answers from God, but I didn't want to ask too much. I remember just sitting and closing my eyes and shutting my eyes and just kind of going in this zone. It was like this trance, right? And what I started to do was, because I felt like God is working in my life and I'm not trusting God enough, I asked God, can you just please like talk to me? And I started to imagine what God's voice would sound like if God was talking to me. And what I started to feel like was that God was basically telling me that He loves me, He or she, to some, that God loves me, that everything is going to be all right, that everything is all right. And I remember when I came out of that meditation, I kind of just felt like, like serene, like I was just leveled, like I was looking around the room. I saw a picture of my mom's face on the mantle. I saw a picture of my sister's face, and I just thought, like, all in that moment, like it was as if um, I was in sync with the world. I was centered. The soundness of mind had come in. I felt the next day, I felt like 1,000 pounds had been lifted off of my back. So for me, also, because of early on, when I was newly sober, I was told prayer and meditation are vital for recovery. I did it mandatory. I mean, I can't go to bed at night until I hit my knees and I pray. It's like the uh, ultimately largest rule for me in recovery is just to get God centered for me. The reason I keep saying for me is that I know that there are people still in recovery and out of recovery that they cringe at the sound of God or higher power. And I'm not coming on here to broadcast for you how you need to find God, or I'm not some evangelist that's trying to tell you like this is religious and you must follow everything I say to make your recovery work. To each their own. I just know that when I'm at one in my recovery with God and centered. I get to have better human interactions with people. I get to, be a better person within myself. I get to be in touch with my spirit. I like to separate. I get to actually recognize my ego as opposed to my soul. And when I'm in recovery, I want to always be living through my soul, because after all, it was my ego that was keeping me out there for the longest time. When you're in recovery, you'll hear a lot of sayings, and some of the most interesting and funnest saying. Well, there was this one saying that always stood out to me a lot. It said that we are spiritual beings having human experiences. So basically, the body, this whole body, is just borrowed. It's like when we die, obviously, what happens? They bury the body. Well, what still remained? It's the soul. So if I'm caught up in my ego all throughout my life, and I do people dirty, and I continue to do drugs, or just like get people on drugs, or people die as a result of buying drugs from me, or drink myself to death, or all these different things, I never really tapped into my soul. But by tapping into my soul, it puts my spirit in a good position, and I get the chance and the opportunity to actually be at one with the earth, be at one with my fellow man, and love and respect not only myself but anyone who I come into contact with. So with that said, now that I've gone over all the questions that were asked of me before the show, I want to open it up for questions. I know that right now we're live on YouTube too, so and we're on Facebook. So if you have any questions, I would love to answer your questions, and just based off of the experience that I have, tell you what I would do in any kind of case of spirituality. And also, let me tell you that we do have our Sober Grind podcast. It can be found on different platforms. It can be found on iTunes. I mean, you can subscribe to it on iTunes. Just type in Sober Grind, and you will find the podcast there. Also, I think it's on Google Play, right, Austin?
Yes,
Right,
sir.
it's on Google Play too, and we are on YouTube now. How do they find it on YouTube?
Search Sober Grind.
Yeah, just search Sober Grind on YouTube, and we would like for you to not only subscribe and listen to the show regularly, but also ask questions. And if you do have a recovery story that you would like to be previewed on, or would like to actually be on the podcast, let me know. I will hook you up, and I would love to hear your testimonial.
And share it with friends and family.
And share it with friends and family, and it'll be a testimonial basically of you and your mini story that we will put on the podcast. It's our recovery story of the week. Also, if you ever have somebody who's suffering from drug addiction, alcoholism, mental health, anything like that, you can always go to one of our pages on Facebook called Ask an Addiction Specialist. Just type it up in that little bar up there, Ask an Addiction Specialist, and we usually always have professionals or even people that are in the respective community of recovery that could answer questions, whatever questions you may have, and that's Ask an Addiction Specialist. We're also, there's our Beginnings Treatment Center page that you can tune into. We have all different types of people that I think we're going to have a special show. Hopefully tomorrow I'm going to talk to Austin about this and surprise him with it too. But we may be having a very special guest if it all goes down tomorrow. So I don't see any questions right now that have been asked. I do. Oh, wait. Okay. Let's see. What's up, Josh? How are you? Jackson. If people don't believe in God, yet that's okay. I'm learning that eventually they will. That's why they made the chapter called We Agnostics. So if you're really following this program, and after reading We Agnostics thoroughly, I believed in definitely bringing some enlightenment and a different perspective. God is active in this thing called recovery, the only thing that saved me. I love that. And I'll say this, and this is my opinion. I didn't used to think this. I used to think that the 12 steps were the gold standard. Like the only way that you're going to stay sober is with the 12 steps. That was when I was like premature in my thinking of recovery. That was like 1 or 2 years in. I later on realized that there are some people that they take other avenues in recovery. There are people that do smart recovery. There are people that just go to church to get sober. There's people that just do it dry. Like they just cold turkey, like they stop. They don't do any more drugs or alcohol, and they don't use anymore. To each their own. I don't know how their spirits are, or if they live through their spirits, because after all, when we use drugs and alcohol, it's, as Uncle Ted, a guy in my old rehab, a counselor in my old rehab, used to say, Pej, do you know why you used to do drugs and alcohol? And I said, why? He said, because it made you feel good, right? And I go, yeah, it made me feel really good. And he goes, You want to know why you wanted to feel good? And I go, why? He said, because you felt bad. And I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, Uncle Ted. That makes a lot of sense. So remember, the same head that caused the problem can't fix the problem. So something's got to fix it. I personally, that chapter, We Agnostics, changed me. It changed me. Like, that was me with the big book, so that worked for me. There's some people that you say the word Alcoholics Anonymous or AA to them, they're like, not me, nope, not doing it, nope. But a lot of treatment centers send people to 12-step meetings for certain reasons. I think that they help a lot of people. They're effective for a lot of people, but they're not for everybody. There's also another organization called SOS, for the total non-God believer. They're all about sobriety, but they pretty much have a program that's been designed for the person that is atheist, for example. So, and then I know that their organization, I know they have some up in LA. I don't know if they have them down in Orange County, but definitely there's a bunch of them, those meetings going on. John asks, how do you deal with criticism of if you practice religion or have spiritual beliefs and a friend or family member mocks or hassles you about it? So let's see. That's a John. How do you deal with criticism if you practice religion or have spiritual beliefs and a friend or family member mocks or hassles you about it? People are critical. People are going to say things sometimes. I mean, it's one thing to be in your addiction and people are criticizing you for being a full-blown drug addict or alcoholic. It's another to have spiritual beliefs or to have beliefs in God or religious beliefs. But to each their own. You are entitled to believing in what you believe in. If family members want to mock you and things like that, then I would just distance myself from family members. There's certain family members that I just don't feel like I need to be around if they're going to be somebody that irritates me or gets under my skin. It's probably best that I just separate myself from those family members, whoever they may be. So I hope I answered your question in that aspect. Any more? And those people that do cringe about God, that's okay. They can cringe. Continue to speak about how God is working in our lives. Thank you. You definitely are speaking. Thank you, Jackson. Let's see here. Sober grind. Cool. Got it. Nice. I want you to listen to it, Jackson. And let's see who else is on here. Would being spiritually unstable be a vehicle for an imminent relapse? Very good question, Wendy. I believe, like I said earlier, our egos are not our amigos. So when we're living our lives through our egos, um, I mean, truth be told, I can just say this from my own experience. When I'm out there in the trenches of drug addiction and alcoholism, I'm just running off of ego. So when I come and get sober, it's not like the ego goes away. I don't think our egos ever go away, but we want to try to overcome it to a certain extent. So if you live more spiritually through your soul, you can kind of put the ego at bay. The ego, from what I've been taught, is doing push-ups. So it's like waiting. It's like waiting to get you when you least expect it. And if you're not spiritually fit and you suddenly go somewhere where someone's having a drink, and then you start like kind of entertaining the thought of having that drink, because why can't you and why can they? If you're not spiritually fit, there's a great chance that you might just put that in you, and there you go. There's a relapse, right? Because you weren't prepared. You didn't have that spiritual defense, and your mentality took you right to the first drink or the first drug, based off of how you are. So yeah, definitely, I think it will make you very unstable if you're not spiritually fit. Or some people just straight white knuckle it and just go through. They get sober, but they don't really feel like they need spirituality. So I can't imagine it. I think that when I'm actually surrounding myself with other people that have spiritual experiences and spiritual awakenings. The whole point of the 12 steps in the first place anyways is to have a spiritual awakening, meaning that I now live a different lifestyle. I don't do what I used to do. My old get down was I need money so I can get dope, and then I need to go somewhere and I need to use it, and I just run through people's lives. I don't care. I'll do whatever I can to get my groove on. When I come into recovery and I actually through the process of the 12 steps, work the 12 steps in a 12-step community, I have a spiritual awakening, and I'm not that guy anymore. All I think about now is how can I be of service to my fellow man? How can I think about how I can, do good things and good deeds. And how is it that a full-blown drug addict that's a liar, cheat, and a thief will come and change their whole life and become somebody who like wants to help people, that wants to go out and be of service and do well, and do charitable acts, or just put a shopping cart back, just many different things that change a person within. And I believe that um, the thought of a drink or a drug doesn't come into my uh, mind anymore. I'm not a person anymore that thinks my head is out to get me. For the longest time, I would hear a lot of people say, "My head is out to get me. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an addict." And I'm thinking, no, man. Over a period of time, you come in here and you get sober, and you actually start working with others and helping others. You stop thinking about yourself so much, and your head is really not out to get you. So, yeah. Is there any other questions? Let's see here. Uno más. Are there ways you can be sober but still be caught up in behaviors of addictive lifestyle? Absolutely. I mean, the drugs and the alcohol are nothing but a symptom. So when you're doing drugs and alcohol, it's just keeping you stuck in life when you're out there. When you're in here and you actually you get past the whole drugs and alcohol thing, addictive behaviors such as video games, sex, porn, food, addictive. I mean, I think I was like, what? When I was brand new, I was eating my feelings a lot. My counselor told me, "Be careful. You're gonna like turn into Grimace and from McDonald's." And I'm like, "No, no, not me." And he said, "No, seriously, you are." And I would just pound on food plates like when I was Persian. We were going to like functions, and I'd eat a lot, and I'd eat a lot. By the time and I remember I weighed like $160 when I came into recovery. By the time I was 3 years sober, I remember weighing myself at a scale at this treatment center I was working at with adolescents, and I look at the scale, it's like 238. I'm like, what? I'm like almost 70 pounds more than when I first got sober. So truly, like I had to like I started going to the gym, getting on the treadmill, working out, and over a period of time, like I had to recognize, I had to become aware of my addictive behaviors, the patterns that I will follow. I'd see cookies. I would think one is so good, but 1,000 is never enough. Like I'm just that type of guy. Like I'll replace one addiction for another. A lot of people have sex addictions. A lot of people have porn addictions. A lot of people are video game addictions. And I've often seen that when people start to fixate on one new addiction in recovery, often over a period of time they realize like this isn't good enough, and it takes them right back to that lifestyle and that old addiction that they were stuck on before. So let's see here. I hope that answered your question. True, give back. What I mean here is that when you used, you not only used, but you acted a certain way that went along with those addictions. Maybe a person is clean, but the behaviors are still there. Does that exist? Yes, it exists. Um, we have this term that we throw around in recovery often. If somebody's acting a certain way that's not conducive to their recovery, we'll say that's old behavior, right? And old behavior can sometimes take you out. But um, my mentor told me, Pej, if you're still doing it, it's not old behavior, it's current behavior. Meaning that we're still we're humans, right? Like we make certain decisions, and sometimes they're not the brightest decisions, right? So we'll still do things that are unhealthy for us, whether it be mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually unhealthy for us. We will do certain things that if we don't really overcome those practices and those attitudes and actions, we're not living spiritually. And I by no means walk on water. I don't have a complete spiritual life. My life is full. I do have a good life, but the ego is always there. I will still have a tendency to become selfish and self-centered. I will try to fulfill myself, and I will chase certain things. And it's not in the form of drugs or alcohol, but I'll chase certain things, whether it be food, women, whatever, to the point where it hurts me. It hurts my spirit. And if I don't, if and then I suddenly kind of have a spiritual bottom in recovery, and I what do? I call my mentor, I call my sponsor, I call whoever I can to kind of guide me back into the path of spirituality. What's up, Kenny? I see you on there. Luke, I see you on there. Hi, Wendy, again. Can our addictive behavior transfer into personal relationships, like being addicted to being mistreated or cheated on? Asking for a friend. Oh, man. I think you know that. Anyway, yeah, definitely they can. I think that to each their own. Everybody can tap into their spirituality in their own way. Some people um, are in recovery for a long time, but they never really grasp the idea of spirituality or want to. I can sit there with judgment on them and be like, well, they're just not getting it. But then how much am I tapped into my spirit, right? Like, am I really truly judging them based off of what I wish that they would be, or is my ego telling me that I'm better than them? Either way, a lot of people can do whatever they want. I think everybody has their own path, their own story, and their own outcome in their lives. And it's a day at a time. We some days I'm spiritually centered, and some days I might just be off. So I hope that answered your question. Any more? Let's see here. Do we have any other questions on YouTube? Is it time to sign out?
We're all caught up.
Okay, we're all caught up. So again, I want to just, I'm going to sign off in a second here, but there's a couple things I wanted to go back over again. On Facebook, if you type in "Ask an Addiction Specialist," you can ask any question that's related to addiction. If you've got somebody that's suffering, come on there and ask. If you are suffering, come on there and ask. Professionals are always readily available. They can help you through talk to you about whatever you're going through. Also, we have the Beginnings Treatment Center um, Facebook page. Please tune in there. We have Dr. Bob Weathers that comes on there. Tomorrow we might have a special guest. I'm going to try to work that and see if I can make it happen. If it does, you shall see who it is. It's a wonderful human being that's recovery based. And then also the podcast, Sober Grind. If you're like driving in traffic in the rain or not the rain, but you are tuned in to and subscribing to our podcast, you can just type in Sober Grind in any podcast outlet, and you will find Austin Armstrong and I. We have our weekly podcast. We do shows. We talk about some of the similar things that we talk about here, and then we also have the recovery story of the week. And if you want to be on the Sober Grind podcast, just your voice, not your face, unless you want to come on this show, then I'll bring you on the show. But if you want to be on the Sober Grind podcast, let me know, and we can definitely make arrangements to hear your short testimonial about your life and how you are doing in your recovery. Until then, I hope everybody's doing great. I hope you have a lovely rest of your Monday evening. I love you all, and peace and be wild.
Are we on?
Did you click end stream over there?